Good morning and welcome to a shortened edition of To The Point. It is Wednesday, December 2nd, 2020. Thank you to those of you joining us on the GBN Grenada Broadcasting Network's Facebook page, the Grenada Broadcasting Network's YouTube channel, the website www.gbn.gd, GBN TV channel 7, 11 and 20, and good morning to the listeners of Classic 105.5, 105.9. This morning we're going to get right into it. We have a shortened program because coming up at 9:30 we begin the broadcast of this morning's budget presentation. We join the GIS at 9:30, and then Parliament sitting, which is where the budget will be read, begins at 10. And to joining me this morning to discuss expectations from the budget presentation by Minister of Finance Gregory Bowen is a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, Mr. Kellon Bob, a former employee here at the GBN, continuing to do his media work out there in the diaspora in the U.S. Good morning, Kellon.
Good morning, Blossom. It is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, so Budget 2021, the presentation, as I said, is scheduled for this morning in just about an hour, actually, by Minister of Finance Gregory Bowen. What are your expectations, speaking from as a Grenadian in the diaspora, your expectations from what will be highlighted in the budget?
Well, I think we have to put the budget in context of what is happening in the global environment. The entire world is experiencing an unprecedented recession. This is the biggest recession that the international community has witnessed since World War II. The biggest economic crisis that the international community, at least some countries, have experienced since the Great Depression. And so when we think in context of what is happening in Grenada, we have to appreciate that Grenada's economic fortunes are tied to the international community because we live in a globalized environment. And so as goes the international community, so would go Grenada. And what I mean by that is that I believe that this will be an austerity budget reflecting the economic crisis that we currently face. We might expect to see budget cuts in certain expenditure areas. We might expect to see, belt tightening in other areas, and we might also expect to see some increased investments in aspects of the economy that can really, help Grenada to buttress itself at this time, such as the agricultural sector. So I would be paying particular attention to what the central government will do with respect to investments in agriculture. Now, they also said that they experienced a precipitous drop in revenue, and we have to appreciate that drop in revenue is to be expected. Tourism, experienced a natural downturn as a result of COVID. Education services, which relates to St. George's University, students are not on island. So again, that is part of that tax base that's no longer there. It would be interesting to see what they do to narrow that gap. But yes, it's going to be a belt tightening budget, I think.
You mentioned the investment in agriculture, and over the past few weeks, I have been speaking to, my viewers and listeners, and most of them, they share the thought that agriculture should get probably the biggest piece of the budget pie, and there are others who feel that tourism and agriculture are what go hand in hand. How you think the budget would reflect the thoughts of the people, one, in relation to agriculture, should get bigger than tourism, or that they should go hand in hand, work together?
Well, I think both narratives are possible. We have to appreciate that at the end of the day, we still need to be self-sufficient. We need to be able to feed ourselves as a country, and we also have to, again, understand the debilitating impact that the food import bill can have on the country. Consuming processed foods, consuming foods from outside tend to be more expensive than what you consume locally, right? And so I believe historically, the Grenada Revolution one of the biggest lessons of the revolution was that the revolution taught us in many respects to feed ourselves, because we not only produced the raw agricultural material, but we also ensured that those raw material became secondary products by way of agro-processed items on supermarket shelves at the time, which we also exported. And so I think if we're thinking about that investment in agriculture, it has to be seen within the context of how we can be self-sufficient and self-sustaining by eating what we grow and growing what we eat. And this is not a cliche. But at the same time, the other narrative here with respect to viewing agriculture and tourism as having a symbiotic relationship, that narrative is also, or should also be consistent, because as a country, if we're going to lay our stake in tourism investment, in investing heavily in the tourism sector, then it becomes important that we are able to feed using our local supply chain, the tourists who are coming to Grenada with locally grown foods. It would make no sense that we are importing foods to supply the hotels, especially at this time when there is a greater investment in tourism in Grenada. And certainly the agricultural industry would have to step up to ensure that whenever the tourists come back, right, that the country has the capacity to provide, most of the agricultural products that the hotels need. So I don't think it's an either-or situation. It should not be an either-or situation.
Another issue relates to public debt. Some people term it as the big secret, that they don't know what the figures look like. And now in these COVIDious times, with government highlighting revenue shortfall because of COVID-19, I can only imagine what that debt would look like. How do you think that would reflect in the budget this morning?
Well, in fiscal year 2018, the Grenada debt situation was, and that was 2 years ago, was $752 million. It did decrease, and it has been consistently decreasing from 2017. There was a decrease of 38 million since 2017, and so the debt in Grenada right now, I would say it's significant with respect, if we're talking about Grenada's debt to GDP ratio. It is very significant, and so what needs to happen now is that I think in the budget document, if you read the budget document clearly, you would observe that Grenada has been paying off its debt, as evidenced in the IMF report as well. Now, the challenge is the country able to continue to service its debt at this time, given that we have a fall in revenue, right? Because some of the revenues that are collected are used in part to service those debts. So Grenadans have to be very aware of what government's plans are with respect to either negotiating moratoriums on current debts that they hold, or obtaining debt forgiveness, which a lot of donor countries might find hard to accept right now because everyone is hurting, okay? Grenada is not the only one that's hurting, especially the donor countries. They're hurting as well. And so, but also the other question that we should be asking ourselves is, if it is based on unofficial reports that monies are being borrowed to fund the 2021 budget, then those are another set of debt obligations that we are taking on, right? And so we have to be very circumspect with respect to looking at the data to determine whether or not One, we would be able to continue to service the debts that we currently owe to, um, international donor agencies and other friendly countries, or whether or not this increasing debt that we have as a result of COVID, in context of the shortfall in revenue, would impact how we're able to manage that. So I think that is something we need to look at very closely to hear what government's policy prescription would be with respect to that.
Speaking of lending agencies, international agencies, I saw a report, some reports yesterday, of a bill to be taken to Parliament today to get permission or the authority to borrow the sum of EC $330 million to finance the budget. And according to the report, some of the agencies they're looking at include the Caribbean Development Bank, the ECCB. They're also looking at International Development Association, among other agencies. Is this expected, considering the times we're in? And is
well, I'm not an economist. I can't. I can't. I wouldn't be able to say whether it's a good move or not. Again, that is a policy prescription that might be needed because of the. Again, let us think of what a budget is, right? A budget is a record of your ability to spend and your ability to collect money. Okay. Now, government's ability to collect money has been severely stymied as a result of COVID-19. Okay, so how then do you find monies to be able to fund your expenditure projects? How do you find monies to pay salaries? How do you find monies to maintain recurrent expenses, meaning things like the hospital, ensuring that hospital services are there for the Grenadian people? How do you find monies to fund a lot of the social welfare programs that you have in Grenada relative to, the roadwork program is a very popular one. I believe the SEED program is also popular. These are social welfare programs that you would need monies for. Now, on the back end, what happens to all of those, types of funding that we are receiving? And so the question needs to be asked, okay? Whether or not the monies that are being borrowed, again, allegedly borrowed here, are they only loans, or are there grants in that as well? Because remember, grant money, you don't necessarily have to pay back. You don't have to pay back for grants. Grant money is given to you. Once you present a robust proposal, you get grant money. And so we have to be able to look into the data to determine whether or not how much of what is being funded for the budget would be either grants. If it's grants, it's great. If it's loans, then that adds to the current debt stock of the country. And so a bigger conversation needs to be had with respect to whether or not we would be able to sustain the current debt to GDP ratio in the country.
We spoke about the need to, or where we think the investment should go. I'm trying to find the document that spoke of the ministries or the industries that got the largest share in the 2020 budget. Off the top of my head, I recall, of course, the Ministry of Finance. I believe the Ministry of Tourism was part of that as well, agriculture. And so the 5 ministries or sectors that you think emphasis needs to be placed on, of course, in addition to agriculture, which I'm sure a lot of people would agree with, where you think those 5 ministries, which ministries?
Yeah, I mean, so again, the Prime Minister of Grenada constantly talks about the construction sector. But what happens in the construction sector and infrastructure is a natural consequence of investments in tourism, right? So a lot of the tourism projects that are currently on stream, a lot of them are private-public partnerships. And so the construction sector, which is sort of a direct spin-off, or what's happening in construction as a direct spin-off of what's going on in tourism. So you have that. So I think we would see a lot of investment in infrastructure, because we have to think about it within the context of any kind of infrastructure development programs have to be seen in context of an economic stimulus, right? The same held true for the United States after the 2008 financial crisis. You had stimulus monies that went to some infrastructure development, and there was talk one time of having an infrastructure program. So I think we would see a lot there. I also think we would continue to see that that heavy reliance and investment in tourism, notwithstanding that visitors are not visiting Grenada in the numbers that would be expected at this time of year. This is supposed to be the cruise tourism season, yes. So I think we'll see a lot of investment in tourism as well as in agriculture. And I also believe in the health services of the country, because there's been a lot of Grenadians have been clamoring for better health care. That has been a cause for the Grenadian public. And I think we also, in the recent cabinet reshuffle, the Prime Minister placed two ministers in the Ministry of Health. We have a minister now responsible for hospital services, right? So it would be interesting to see whether or not investments in health would increase or whether it should remain the same. I predict that it might increase, given that we have a new minister there, which might want to shore up the work that she needs to do in that sector.
For the first time in 7 years, if my 2013, 2020 is first time in 7 years, we have an official leader of the opposition in the House of Parliament. And this would be the first time in 7 years that we would actually have a rebuttal to the presentation of the budget. As the opposition leader, what do you think Mr. Clement should be looking out for, Tobias Clement should look out for, that he should pay keen attention to reply to or responding to the budget?
Well, I don't know, Blossom. I think opposition leaders traditionally, their role has been to critique the budget, right? But their role traditionally, if we go back in history to leaders of the opposition in Grenada, before Mr. Clement, we had Nazem Burke as opposition leader. We had Michael Batiste. We had George Brizan, Tillman Thomas. These folks were all leaders of the opposition. Even the current prime minister,
exactly,
but opposition leader as well. And so, what the opposition usually plays an adversarial role in responding to the budget. But I think, given the current economic crisis that has enveloped Grenada and has enveloped the international community, the opposition leader ought to be reflecting the pain that Grenadians are experiencing in this period. There is a lot of pain. There is a lot of unemployment. There are people who have been sent home through no fault of their own, just because of the nature of the economic picture. And so the opposition leader not only has to respond to the budget, but traditionally what opposition leaders do is that they reflect the issues. They reflect how government policy or government policies are impacting or is impacting the population. And so that has to be the opposition leader's role. Now, I can't predict how Mr. Clement would respond to this budget. I know that Mr. Clement has expressed concern relative to not receiving, parliamentary order papers in a timely manner. I suspect he might be saying the same thing now, that he probably didn't receive the budget document in time. As a matter of fact, in the 2012 budget, Dr. Mitchell also had the same issue, that he did not receive, when he was opposition leader, that is in 2012, and Nazir Burke as Minister of Finance presented that budget. His issue was that he didn't receive the budget document in time to be able to respond adequately. So all eyes would be on Mr. Clement, of course. This is the first time that we have some diversity of thought in the parliament. But Mr. Clement's delivery, I would say his oratory would not be, to my mind, would have the same same charismatic effect, if you will, as a George Brazan or a Michael Batiste. I remember when Michael Batiste was leader of the opposition, he actually brought a bottle of dirty water from his constituency, from the reservoir, and that was a prop that he used as his opening salvo into the budget, right? I remember George Brazan, when he was leader of the opposition, his rebuttals to the budget were very memorable, right? And when you had more diversity of opposition in the parliament, those were interesting days, right? But now you only have one voice. So again, I don't know how much of an impact that lone voice would have. But of course, the people of the country should expect that the opposition leader should reflect the pain and the issues that Grenadians are currently facing.
We have time for just one more question from the Facebook. Somebody's asking, do you think that we will be seeing more money generated into programs for youths as education and agriculture with the talk of marijuana decriminalization and infrastructure?
Yeah, I think so. I honestly think, and that is an area that I forgot to mention. I think there would be greater investment in, I believe, a lot of training and development programs, so that while people are currently at home, a lot of people are unemployed. Perhaps this might be a good opportunity for youth programs to, I suppose, train the workforce in preparation for example, when the tourism sector emerges. On the question of marijuana, I do not anticipate that issue would come up in the budget as a substantive agenda item. I think they might talk about it, but I don't think we see any kind of implementation, because in listening to the member of parliament for the town of St. George, Peter David, at a town hall meeting, he said that there is a committee in place, I believe, that is led or chaired by the Minister of Health on the question of marijuana decriminalization. So I do not, and again, given how socially conservative Grenada is, I do not see any movement on the marijuana question in the budget at all. I mean, eventually it will come, but this year I don't see it.
Fair enough. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bubb, for sparing half an hour with us as we get ready for the budget presentation. Always good to hear from you and your thoughts on matters of Grenadian importance. Appreciate it so much.
Awesome, Blossom. You guys have a wonderful day, and we all look forward to listening to the budget.
Yes.
The first by Gregory Bowen, actually.
Mr. Bowen, yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
All
Continue
right.
to stay COVID-19 free.
Yes, that's what I'm doing.
All right. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Mr. Kellon Bubb as we prepare for the budget presentation. In just maybe about 2 minutes or so, we will join the Government Information Service, GIS, for the start of the broadcast of this morning's proceedings. The broadcast starts at 9:30, where we give you the build-up to the budget presentation. The actual sitting of Parliament, which is where the budget will be read, begins at 10 a.m. And, of course, we will carry it for you live on Classic and GBN channels 7, 11, and 20. So let's end the program here. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay tuned. The budget presentation by Minister of Finance, the Honorable Gregory Bowen, comes up in just about half an hour. We join the broadcast in a few minutes. Have yourselves a safe, productive Wednesday. I don't think you'll hear from me for the rest of the day. So have yourselves a good one, and I'll see you tomorrow morning, God willing.